There's many activities you can do in OSRS like bossing, PvP, skilling, pet hunting, merching, and so on. But one of the most popular activities is collection log hunting. Another thing most players enjoy is AFKing, because for some reason we love this game so much that we want to spend as little time playing it as possible. Today I'm going to be combining those two things together to give you 10 ideas of AFK activities that you can do to get collection log slots. We all have times where we'd rather watch YouTube or Netflix and do something in the game with very low intensity on the second monitor. We need to define what AFK means though, so that you know what to expect from this video. Would you say that smelting cannonballs is AFK? Most people would say yes. So we'll define AFK by using the cannonball rule that I just made up right now. Making cannonballs is 1 minute and 17 seconds of downtime. So based on consensus, I will be defining AFK as anything that on average you'd have at least 77 seconds of downtime. This was originally going to be a list of 10 activities, but after editing the video, there's a lot more than 10 activities. So I'm clumping them together more as categories of activities. But either way, these are in no particular order, and starting with number 1, we have champion scrolls. There's 10 champion scrolls plus the cape on the log for a total of 11 collection log slots. Each champion scroll is 1 out of 5,000, and every single monster is AFKable in some way or another due to either the monsters being aggressive, using a cannon, or using a multi-hitting weapon like the Vannerbow. If you're going for the music cape, you will need to get 1 champion scroll for a music track, and the fastest one would be from goblins, which with the cannon takes about 2 hours to meet the drop rate. The cannon holds 30 cannonballs, but it can hold 35, 45, or 60 with the medium, hard, and elite tier of combat achievements respectively. The cannon is especially nice for single-way combat with non-aggressive NPCs, because the axe is kind of like an aggression potion. And speaking of aggression potion, we're actually supposed to be getting aggression potions in the game once Varlamore Part 2 comes out with the Herblore minigame. It's going to be called the Potion of Goading, and once that comes out, there's going to be a whole lot more monsters you can AFK, and maybe that'll be good for its own separate video someday. And if you do have any ideas of where you would use this potion, let me know. But if you're watching this video months after it's posted, you might find that potion useful for getting champion scrolls, especially if you don't want to use the cannon or upkeep cannonballs on an Iron Man. I do want to mention the NPC aggression timer plugin. Typically monsters are aggressive to you for 10 minutes and then they lose aggro, and in order to make them aggro back onto you, you have to leave the area and come back. But what exactly is leaving the area? Well, this plugin shows you what the area is. It's this yellow line. And once you leave this yellow line, you'll see that the timer is reset to 10 minutes. So if monsters were unaggressive, like once this runs down to 0, moving out of the yellow line will reset that 10-minute timer. One more consideration when going for champion scrolls is thinking about which ones you'll passively get. There's a pretty good chance you'll get the giant scroll while doing Slayer. You may get the goblin scroll if you do a lot of Bandos God Wars, or the imp scroll if you do a lot of Zami, or the skeleton scroll if you do a lot of Barrows. Or when going for number 2 on this list, you may get the zombie champion scroll. Number 2 is the Mask of Renewal from Undead Druids. Undead Druids are in the Forthos dungeon on Zaya, and they attack with mage and melee. So to AFK, you would want to use range so that you take no damage. They'll only be maging you that way. Just make sure you're leaving a tile between you and the druid. The Salve EI works here, and use the best range gear you have. I mean, you don't have to use what I'm using. You can use Blessed Hide and Rune Crossbow, for example. You can bring the herb sack and seed box to pick up some of the drops, Alk runes to make some GP, and you can bring a Bone Crusher for a bit of passive prayer XP. These guys have low defense, so you could swap in your prayer gear like Devout Boots, Ring of the Gods, and so on to make it a bit more AFK. And when your prayer runs out, you can use the altar north of this room. And if you accidentally take some damage, you could use the Blowpipe spec, the Sarah Godsword spec, or disable the Bone Crusher and bring bones to Peaches. You could even leave on Eagle Eye / Rigor to get more kills per hour, but that's going to make it a bit less AFK since you're going to have to restore your prayer at the altar a bit more often. The drop rate for the Mask of Renewal is 1 in 1,000, and I'm getting about 200 kills per hour, so for me it would be about 5 hours to meet the drop rate. And you may notice that the 10-minute timer has run out, so the druids aren't aggressive to me anymore. We're going to run out of the line, run back in. You'll see they will once again aggro me. Again, these guys do drop the zombie champion scroll as well, so you could get that along the way. And in a similar vein, you could also get the zombie scroll while killing armored zombies for the zombie axe, or from zombie pirates when you're going for the teleport anchoring scroll. And by the way, those are a couple bonus ideas of log slots you can go for, although they're not exactly as AFK, I'd say, especially with the zombie pirates being in the wildy. Number 3 on this list is the Shaman Mask. You have to have the Corsair Curse quest done, and there's a default spirit tree pretty close by that you can access with option number 5 to fell the pills. The Shaman Mask is 1 out of 1200, and it's dropped by both the Ogress Shamans, which use Mage, and the Ogress Warriors, which use melee. I've got the Gem Bag, Soul Bearer, and Seed Box for the drops, as well as Alch runes and runes for Bones to Peaches, since I won't be praying here. It doesn't really matter what combat style you bring. I'm using melee, so I got the SGS spec for healing, but if you want to use range, you could also use the Blowpipe spec for healing. They do drop food, but it comes out to 1 salmon every 10 kills, which that alone probably won't be enough to upkeep your health. If you're really trying to be AFK and you're too lazy to pick up the bones for Bones to Peaches, and you're too lazy to use healing specs, the bank is pretty close by. Or you could use any teleport to a bank and use the spirit tree to get back. Like the GE teleport would be good because there's a spirit tree at the GE. It may seem like I'm clicking a lot, which isn't AFK, but you can pretty easily find a spot with multiple close by spawns where your character won't be standing around too long without being aggroed. There's a lot of safe spots in the area if you did want to use range. It won't be as AFK if you have to lure every ogress that you kill, although if you have low stats and you're using, say, a Dorgeshan crossbow, then it may be worth it, and it may actually be pretty AFK in that case. Keep in mind, the shamans can attack 4 tiles away, so if you're safe spotting them, you'll have to stand at least 5 tiles away for them to not be able to attack you. I haven't really done ogresses much, so I can't speak from personal experience, but after watching a few videos from people with mid-tier stats and gear, it seems like 100 kills per hour is pretty reasonable, making this 12 hours to meet the drop rate. Number 4, I'm clumping 2 together. We have Moss Giants for the Bryophyta Essence and Hill Giants for the Hill Giant Club. The Bryo Essence is 1 out of 118 from the Moss Giant boss, and the club is also 1 out of 118 from the Hill Giant boss. But to fight the boss, you have to get keys. There's the Giant Key and the Mossy Key, and you use up 1 key per boss fight. These keys are untradeable, so you have to earn them yourself, and the keys are on the collection log, so just getting 1 of each will be 2 more log slots. The drop rate for giant keys is pretty straightforward. It's 1 out of 128 from hill giants, except in the wildy it's twice as common, so the wildy hill giants drop at 1 out of 64. Now for mossy keys, 1 out of 150 for moss giants, 1 out of 120 for moss giants in the Ironworth dungeon, and 1 out of 60 from wildy moss giants. But if you're on the Slayer task, then they're more common. On task, they're 1 out of 50 from regular ones, 1 out of 40 in the Ironworth dungeon, and then the wildy they're 1 out of 33.6. Going by those assumptions, it's about 15.1k hill giants to get 118 giant keys, and about 17.7k moss giants to get 118 mossy keys. Although Obor and Bryophyta do drop their respective keys each at 1 out of 16, so you can kill slightly less giants to meet the drop rate. Where should you kill them? There's not really a right or wrong answer. It's kind of personal preference, like if you're a main or an iron, because that changes your access to cannonballs. If you go to a single way spot, like shown on screen, with a cannon and you want to use a lot of cannonballs, see if you can hide from the giants, because if you're not in combat, the cannon will hit everything instead of just one at a time. Another good spot could be the giant's den. There's hill and moss giant spots here, and because it counts as the catacombs, you're able to get totem pieces and ancient shards here. Because you're theoretically going to be killing tens of thousands of these for a bunch of keys, there's a very high chance that you're going to get the giant champion scroll along the way. If you don't want to use any cannonballs, you could go to the catacombs. It's multi-combat there. You can aggro all the giants in the area and then let your character auto-retaliate. If you have lower defense, maybe you want to use Proselyte and Prey Melee, but with higher stats, you should be fine with tanky gear and food just in case you're an SGS. The Vendor Bow could be another good option to use here. And if we get aggression potions in the game, or the goading potions, this would be a good use case for them since these guys aren't aggressive if you're a high combat level. When I did my Bryophyta Essence grind on this account, I wrote down some notes. I did it with a cannon but in singles combat, and I was basically using the cannon as a way to aggro the moss giants, not because I wanted to use it for DPS, because I want to go really AFK. And you can see my notes here. I spent about 3 cannonballs per KC, got about 500 kills per hour, which means 1500 cannonballs used per hour, and that's also equivalent to 7500 prayer XP per hour with the Bone Crusher. With that method, it would have been about 10 hours to meet the drop rate for the champion scroll, and about 30 hours to get the number of keys to meet the drop rate for the essence. I've never specifically gone for Hill Giant keys, but I would guess maybe it's like half the amount of time, so maybe 20 hours maybe if you're doing this kind of method. Moving on to number 5, we've got another 2-in-1 here. This is Motherlode Mine and free-to-play Motherlode Mine, aka Camdozaal. I'm sure you all know how Motherlode Mine works and I don't need to explain it, but there are 6 collection log slots that you can get here. You only need the helmet for the Fowler Hard Diary, so some people just come here for the helmet or just the coal bag and then leave and forget about this place. So if nothing else, let this be a reminder that this is an AFK thing you can come back to if you forgot about it. If you're an Iron Man, you're definitely going to want a coal bag, and for any kind of account, you're going to want the full Prospector outfit for the Master Clue step, or you could sub out the top for a Rock Body 4. You are able to sell items back to the shop to get 80% of the nuggets back, but I mean, just get all the items. Motherlode has recently been updated to make it even more AFK because you can unlock the upstairs hopper, and it's more XP per hour than before because they changed coal to give XP now. You can get the outfit from Volcanic Mine, although it takes longer, but if you plan to do Volcanic Mine eventually, then you won't need to do as much Motherlode. Moving over to Camdozaal, this is very similar to Motherlode, except it's free to play, so it has worse XP rates. You have to do the Below Ice Mountain quest to access this place, and it's a bit of a run here, but if you have the Whisperer teleport unlocked on the Ring of Shadows, that takes you pretty close by. There's 3 kind of main activities here. There's fishing and processing the fish, there's killing the rock golems, and there's mining these veins on the wall. And mining the veins on the wall, that's kind of like the main activity here that's going to give the most collection logs. There's 10 total log slots. You have the 3 pieces of the mace. Each one of these comes from each of those 3 activities I mentioned. When you put them all together, you get this one. And the rest of this stuff, this all comes from the mining of the veins, including this last one, the Imkondo hammer. That's an equipable hammer. Well, this comes broken, but you can very easily fix it for 1250 Baronite shards, which you get from doing the activities here. As you can see, I'm not even done with 1 inventory, and I already have 250. When you finish getting your full inventory of these Baronite deposits, you're going to come over to the anvil sign on the minimap, and you're going to want a hammer with you. But if you didn't bring one, there's a bank chest over here, or you can pick up the hammer that spawns right on the ground here. Bring it over to this Baronite Crusher and AFK once again and let your character do all the work. And if you're lucky, one of these, instead of turning into shards, will turn into one of the collection log slots. That's the mining section, and we have 2 more sections. Next one is the fishing section. You bring a small or a big fishing net. You could do either or. And you fish, and that's it. This is how you get the 1 collection log slot, the 1 mace piece. Once your inventory gets full, or as it's getting full, you can grab the knife spawn over here and prepare the fish on the table. We get a little bit of cooking XP, and you'll see they turn from raw into not raw. You get cooking XP from doing that part, and then you can offer them at the altar, and this gives you prayer XP. You don't have to do either of these parts though. This won't get you the collection log slot. This is just for the extra XP, but if you're a member, this XP is so negligible, it's probably not worth your time. And for the 3rd section, where you get the 3rd piece of the mace, we're gonna go all the way to the eastern side. The final room is where the Chaos Golems are. And you're gonna bring your best gear, probably your best melee gear. You can bring food, combat potion if you want, and awaken the rubble. You're going to kill these golems. These have a 1 in 150 chance of dropping that collection log slot. On the road to green logging this place, you're going to get way more Baronite shards than you ever know what to do with. And you could exchange them with Ramarno over here. You can buy different unlocks, as well as a temporary 1-hour boost, which you'd probably want to wait until after you unlock all these other things first before you start getting boosts. If you want to save bank space, you don't have to hold on to these Baronite shards. You could deposit them into the Sacred Forge here, and you could withdraw them anytime by pressing empty. You could spend 750 Baronite shards to enter the Camdozaal vault, and the loot is pretty mediocre, but more importantly, there's a music track that you unlock from here. So if you want to get the music cape eventually, make sure you do that. The amount of time it takes to finish this collection log is very dependent on RNG. It could be anywhere from just a couple hours to 10+ hours. One final thing about this is these 5 items, these 5 collection log slots that you get from mining the veins, you can bring these to the Varrock Museum and you get kudos, but just for the first 1 of each that you bring. Number 6 is the 3 big fish. Technically, there's a 4th big fish from Temperance Campros, there's the big harpoon fish, but that's kind of different from the main three. And they are the big bass, the big swordfish, and the big shark. And you get these by just fishing the fish how you normally would. People don't typically get these passively because none of them are common training methods when going for 99 fishing. Usually people do temporos, karambwans, barbarian fishing, or minnows. And while fishing minnows does award you sharks, you can't get the big shark from that. The big swordfish is 1 in 2,500 from harpoon fishing, but remember, you do get tuna more than half the time, and the 1 in 2,500 rate is per swordfish. I'm not certain how long it would take, but I would guess maybe 20 hours to meet the drop rate. There are tick manipulation methods, like 2-tick methods for each of the big fish if you want to get them faster, but that would kind of defeat the purpose of this video, meant to show off the AFK methods. The big bass is 1 out of 1,000 from big net fishing, which doesn't sound that bad, but with big net fishing, you get a wide variety of items, and you only get the big fish roll when you get a bass. Again, I'm only taking a somewhat educated guess, but I would estimate that it's maybe 15 to 20 hours to meet the drop rate for the big bass. The Rada's Blessing gives you a chance to get an extra fish, and fun fact, if that procs when you get a big fish, the second one doesn't show up in the collection log, which is what happened to me with the bass. And finally, the big shark is 1 in 5,000. You need 76 fishing to fish shark, and the wiki says that at the lower levels, you'll average 90 per hour versus 170 per hour at higher levels. That would make the big shark 55 hours at the lower levels, or 30 hours at the higher levels. Number 7, we got another 2-for-1, Trouble Brewing and Castle Wars, the 2 AFK minigames. Let's go over Trouble Brewing first. There's 30 collection log slots from this minigame, and I'll walk you through a whole game so you can see how the method goes. World 304 is the official Trouble Brewing world, but I'm going to be doing it in a random world with my alt. Doing it this way doesn't change anything with the method, it's just I want to get the collection log slots on both my accounts, and you need 2 people to play the minigame. So this way I can start my own world right away, and I won't have to wait for the current ongoing game in the official world to end, because there can only be 1 game going at a time per world. You can't bring in any followers, any items in your inventory, or anything equipped in the head slot, so you can't bring in your own items for alking or fletching. When the game starts, go to the workbench and grab 25 buckets. The default left click is take 1, but I've swapped it to take 5. Use a bucket on the water pump and your character will fill them up automatically. Once you've filled up all the buckets, click on the ladder to go upstairs and use a bucket of water on this hopper that I have highlighted. Your character will empty all the buckets, and you'll see the green number in the top middle of the screen. That'll be going up each time a bucket is emptied, and the goal is to get that number to 100. When they're all emptied, go back down the ladder, use a bucket on the water pump, and when your inventory is full again, you'll go back upstairs, empty them all into the hopper, and repeat this process. In total, you'll be doing 4 trips to get to 100, and then the points you get from buckets will be capped out. The game lasts for 20 minutes, and it takes 4 minutes to get 100 buckets emptied, which means for the next 16 minutes, you can go do normal human things like eat, or shower, or whatever normal people do. Normally you would get logged out after 5 minutes of being idle, but with the logout timer plugin on RuneLite, you can set it up to 25 minutes, so you can truly go away from your keyboard for 16 minutes. When the game ends, you'll be awarded 100 of the currency, which is called Pieces of 8. And if you go back in to start up the next game, it's a 3-minute wait, but if you hop to a different world with your accounts and then go in, the timer will only be like 30 seconds to a minute to start the next game. So instead of 23 minutes per 100 pieces of 8, you can actually make it 21 minutes per 100 pieces of 8. Jagex has updated Trouble Brewing recently to give decent XP for properly playing the minigame, and they have more updates planned for the future to possibly award more pieces of 8 for properly playing. You can watch other guides for that though, because that falls out of the scope of AFKing, which is what you're here for. I'm going to go by the assumption that you're not using an alt and that you're doing 23-minute games with this method in the mass world. That is 260 pieces of 8 per hour. You need 39,590 to buy everything in the shop. And unlike a lot of other reward shops, you cannot sell these items back for full or partial credit. So you will actually have to get the full 39.6k to complete this collection log. That's about 152 hours. If you were saving 2 minutes per game with an alt, you'd be getting 285 pieces of 8 per hour, which would bring it down to 139 hours. But either way, It's a long time. As you can see, based on my pieces of 8, I've already spent a lot of time here, and luckily for you, I'm almost done, because I know as soon as I finish, Jagex will update Trouble Brewing to let you sell rewards back for 80% of the points refunded, but not until I finish. Switching over to Castle Wars, if you do this in a mass world with random people, it'll be less tickets per hour because you won't win every game, and there's a 5-minute wait between games on a Castle Wars world versus only 2 minutes wait on other worlds. On the mass worlds, you can AFK, although it might be frowned upon, and if you get PK'd, you're going to want to leave the starting room so you don't get booted from the game. So I'd strongly recommend doing this with either a friend or an alt. Now there's 4 options for point distributions, but you're going to do either option 1 or option 3. The first option is one account scores 1 point and the other does nothing. The winning character will get 3 tickets while the losing side gets 1. This is best if you're using an alt, but if you're playing with a friend to make it fair, or if you want to get the collection log done on your alt too, this would make it equal if you go with option 3. You simply start the game and do nothing, and then each side will get 2 tickets at the end. If you are going to be scoring 1 point, it's about 2 minutes to score a point, and then you have 18 minutes of AFK time standing around doing nothing. Again, you're going to want the logout timer plugin on for this. To calculate tickets per hour, I'm going to assume you're not doing the mass worlds because there's too many variables there to calculate accurately. It's 20 minutes per game, and since we're going with 2 minutes between games, that's 22 minutes for either 2 or 3 tickets. 2 tickets per game would mean 5.45 tickets per hour, and 3 tickets per game would mean 8.18 tickets per hour. The Castle Wars collection log has 39 items on it, and the combined cost of all these items, and keeping in mind it's like 5 or 8 tickets per hour, it's 5,549 tickets. Here's the list of all the items on the wiki and the cost for each of them. And there's the total right there. But the great thing about this is that you get 100% of the tickets back when you sell the item back to the shop. So you don't actually have to have this many tickets at once. If you want to get the collection log done, you have to get the amount of tickets that the most expensive item is, which is 800. That's at least a bit more reasonable. Now, if you're going for 800 tickets and you're doing the tied score 0-0 and you're getting 2 tickets per game per player, that means you're getting 5.45 tickets per hour, which means it is about 147 hours doing the 0-0. If you're boosting one account though and you're scoring 1 point to get the 3 tickets, then you'll be getting the 8.18 tickets per hour, which means that in that case, it would take you about 98 hours. Next up on the list, we are going to fairy ring code BLP because we are going to the TzHaar area, which is number 8 on the list, the TzHaar creatures. There's 10 items on the collection log, and this can get a bit confusing, so if you are ever lost, you can look up the name of the item on the wiki of whatever you're missing and see exactly which creature to get it from. But you gotta be careful because a lot of the names are very similar. We'll start with the meleeers because that's probably the most simple one to AFK. And these are the Kets, and if you could highlight them and color code them if you want to make it easier. All of the meleeers drop these first 3 items, but there's 2 different levels of the meleeers. There's the lower levels, the 149s, they only drop these first 3, but the level 221s, the higher levels, drop these first 3 and these last 3, the full obby set as well. The drop rate from the lower levels for the first 3 is 512, and from the higher levels it's 512, so you may as well go for the higher levels because you're also going to have to get the full obby set, which is 1 out of 2k. You are able to buy the obby set from a shop, but that does not fill out the collection log. I'm not sure if any of the higher levels are outside of the inner TzHaar city. I haven't seen any, at least. I haven't searched too hard, but if that is the case, it seems like it is that you can only find the 221s in here. You will have to get a fire cape. You don't have to give up your fire cape to go in here, but you do have to have a fire cape and show that you've earned it before you can enter the inner TzHaar city. You can use whatever combat style you want. Melee really isn't ideal though because halberds are really low DPS. I'm just using it to show you that it's possible. Although with Araxor coming out soon, there's supposed to be a new DPS halberd called the Noxious halberd, which may actually make melee safe spotting a worthwhile alternative. But yeah, there's a ton of these sulfur vents all over the place that you can easily trap the meleeers behind. Next up we have the Zills, the level 133s. These guys can use range or melee, and you'll have to look closely to see which weapon they have. They could have the stabby boys or they could have the throwy rings. So you could color code them to see which one's the meleeers and which one's the rangers a bit easier. The meleeers, the rangers, and the magers, they all drop the obby cape, but these level 133s, these rangers, meleers, they drop this item, and this item, and the majors drop this item. So that is all the items covered now. So you'll find one that has the stabby boys, click on him, go behind the sulfur vent, and he will not be throwing those knives at you. So you can save spot here and you can roll the drops. After running around and looking at all the zills in the area, it seems like most of them, almost all of them, are meleers. So they're not actually rangers. I mean, I saw one ranger, but for the most part, I guess calling them rangers is just an easier way to classify them when you're discussing which items you're looking for. But for the most part, these are going to be meleers, and you can just safe spot them, and you're not going to have to worry about praying for them. And then the drop rates from the zills, it doesn't matter which one you switch it to. If you switch it to the knife version or the ring version, it's the same drop rates. And finally, we're going to look at the majors. The majors just drop that one item besides for the obby cape, and it is pretty rare, 1 out of 4,096. And these are the majors, the medj. But I'm actually not going to classify them as AFK, and probably not worth including in this video. I'll just show you what happens when you try to attack one. It draws the aggro of all the other monsters in the area, which is not very AFK. There are better methods involving that if you're trying to be efficient, which aren't AFK, and I'm not going to go over in this video, like using the Din's Bulwark, for example, or barraging. And there's plenty of other guides out there if you are looking for efficient collection log slot hunting. For the sake of AFK-ness, there's really going to be 9 collection log slots that are going to be relatively easy to AFK. Plus, with the drop rate of this being 1 in 4,000, it's a pretty unfun log slot to go for anyways, so I'd say just don't worry about it. If you have lowish stats and you're using a lower tier weapon like a rune crossbow, you might want to only aggro one at a time and stand behind the safe spot, and that'll be pretty AFK because you have low DPS. But if you have a better weapon like a blowpipe though, aggroing one at a time may not be that AFK because you'll be killing them too fast. And in that case, you should aggro multiple at a time and let auto retaliate do the work. And the assumption is that if you're at a stage in your account where you can afford a blowpipe, then I'm sure you can also spend GP on prayer pots. You may want to consider using a Serp Helm with the blowpipe, because then you'll immediately venom every monster you hit. And you might even end up killing some of them before you even get around to attacking them, depending on how many you aggro at once. The Venator Bow may sound good to use here, but you can't control what it aggroes, and it's probably going to end up aggroing the monsters that will draw the aggro of everything onto you, which you don't want if you're AFK. If you're going to be praying, you could also use melee with Proselyte to really maximize your prayer bonus. Next time you get a TzHaar Slayer task, when you've been looking for an excuse for something to AFK, you could consider doing this instead of a JA task. Or if you don't even have TzHaar tasks unlocked, you could consider unlocking them to be able to passively work towards these log slots whenever you get them assigned, so that way you'll also be getting Slayer XP and the boost from the Slayer Helm. Number 9 is Kurasks, and for this, you're going to need level 70 Slayer. There's 2 places you can fight them. There's the Fremnik Slayer Dungeon, which is where I'm going right now, fairy rune code AJR, or the Ireworth Dungeon, which is in Prif. To save inventory space, you can bring along with you an herb sack, gem bag, and seed box, and the Bone Crusher for the passive prayer XP. And you're going to want runes for High Alch. To be able to even damage Kurasks, you have to use either leaf-bladed weapons for melee, broad bolts / arrows for range, or the magic dart spell if you're maging. If you're a lower level Iron Man without any leaf-bladed weapons, and of course you can't buy them off the GE, you're probably better off safe spotting with range rather than trying to fight them with the leaf-bladed spear, which is the only leaf-blade weapon that you can straight up buy as an iron. This tile I'm on is a great safe spot because Kurasks are 3 tiles wide, but the opening to get in here is only 2 tiles wide, so they can never reach you when you're standing here. Kurasks have 4 uniques. There's the leaf-bladed sword, 1 out of 384, the mystic robe top light, 1 in 512, the leaf-bladed battle axe, 1 in 1026, and one more at the bottom here, there is the Kurask head, 1 in 3000. These 2 though are dropped by other monsters besides Kurasks, or other monster I should say. The leaf-bladed sword you can also get from Turoths, 1 in 500, so it is more common from Kurasks. And the mystic robe top light you can get from the Hydra boss. You get 2 rolls, 1 out of 101. But if you're like safe spotting / AFKing Kurasks, you're probably pretty far away from getting to Hydra. If you're on a main account, you can just come here right away with a leaf-bladed axe, tank gear, and SGS, and bones to peaches. Or you could use Proselyte and prayer pots if you want. You'll get a lot more kills per hour than ranging. Plus, Kurasks are aggressive, which makes them nice in AFK, and every 10 minutes you can just quickly reset the aggro timer. If you're an Iron Man though, you probably are better off safe spotting, at least until you get a leaf-bladed sword before swapping over to meleeing. But there are a lot of variables, and it does depend on what your stats and gear are like for each combat style. These drop hard clues, so you could juggle a bunch on the ground and go do them when your AFK session is over, which leads to even more collection log slots. Besides for just collection log slots, you're also getting all of this loot along the way too, which as a main account that's at least a few 100k per hour, maybe even 500k plus. It is very dependent on your stats though. A lot of variables once again that go into that. And if you're an Iron Man, you get a lot of useful supplies that you could use for herb lore, items for alching, seeds for farming, and even more herb lore, secondaries, tree payments, bones. And because a lot of these drops come as notes, or they alch, which stacks as GP, or they're herbs, which you store in your herb sack, you can really camp here for a very, very, very long time and never have to leave. And finally, for number 10, of course, I have to mention star mining. For this, you're going to want the prospector gear if you have it, your best pickaxe, a charged glory if you want some extra gems, along with a gem bag to hold them. And once you get the celestial ring from star mining, you can use it to mine more stars. Technically, the only thing that you need to have though is just a pickaxe and maybe some teleports to get around. When a star falls, it will be between size 6 and 9. Nice. And as long as someone is mining it, after 7 minutes, it will go down a size and you'll have to re-click. You can see the mining level requirement per star size, so the higher mining you have, the better. Now, how do you find shooting stars? You're gonna go to Google and type OSRS shooting stars. Find this website, osrsportal.com. Go to that and you will have the shooting stars tracker. You can see how long it's been since the star was updated, the world it's in, what size it is, where the location is. You probably want to try to find one that's the highest tier that you can mine at least, or just one that's high in general, but it's also a relatively easy place to get to, because if you're trying to AFK, you're not trying to spend a bunch of time running around. You want to get there as fast as possible. So let's go to this one, World 356. Tier 8 at the Champions Guild mine. That's kind of funny because I already happen to be on World 356. So let's go to the Champions Guild and we'll probably see a bunch of people already there because there always is a bunch of people. Here's the shooting star. You click to mine. You can see that this level is already about halfway depleted. You can prospect it and you'll see it's 52% is what it's at. It'll tell you the star size, the mining level. At this point, there's about 3.5 minutes left of AFK time. And once it goes down to the next tier, all you have to do is re-click. No matter how many people are mining a star, whether it's 1 person or 100, it will always deplete at the same rate. So it's always guaranteed to be 7 minutes of AFK if you click as soon as it goes down a size. Also, the chat at Shooting Stars is pretty bad, so I'd probably recommend turning off the public chat because you're only going to lose brain cells here. I mean, it's actually insane how consistently toxic the chat is here. Like, you can go here on any world and there's more than probably 10 people every single time, man. Every single time. And so you're aware of how many people there really are on this one spot. If I were to use this spell, you could see in the top it says 239 more options. I think that means there's 239 people standing here on this one spot. There are people standing around these areas, but there's so many people standing in one place that it's not even loading everyone else that's mining all around the star. If we look at the world population, let's refresh here. If you ever see a world that has a bit higher population than all the other worlds, it's usually because of a shooting star. There's 2 items on the collection log for shooting stars. There's the celestial ring and the star fragment, and technically the mining pet too. And both of these items you buy from Dusuri here in Falador using Stardust. Stardust is the currency you get while mining shooting stars. The celestial ring is 2,000 and the star fragment is 3,000. And you can get about maybe 800 to 1,000 Stardust per hour. The star fragment recolors a piece of the mining outfit, so you might actually want to get 4 of these, even though it's only 1 collection log slot, so that way you can recolor each piece of the prospector outfit. So if you do that, you'll be spending 12,000 Stardust on star fragments, and then 2k for the ring, so that'd be 14k total. The ring gives an invisible +4 mining boost when you have it equipped, whether or not the ring is charged. Personally, I don't think it's really worth charging. What it does, you charge it up with Stardust, and it gives you a 1 out of 10 chance of giving you an extra ore for ores up to Addy. but it's 1 out of 10 and it depletes a Stardust whether or not you actually mine an ore. You do, however, get XP for both of the mined resources. I'd say you'd be better off spending your extra Stardust on the bag full of gems, which is 300, or the soft clay pack, which is 150. There are other shops that sell the soft clay packs and the bags full of gems. Besides for Stardust, you can also buy it for unidentified minerals or at Motherlode for golden nuggets. And then same thing for the bag full of gems you can get from those 2 other locations as well. You can sell them back for 80% of the currency returned, but you can only sell them back to the store from where they were purchased. You will not be able to exchange these different materials for each other. This is not a currency exchange. The prices are constantly changing, so at any given time, if you do want to check which is more valuable, if you do want to spend your extra resources after unlocking the collection log slots on either the gems or the soft clay, you can check the wiki and it'll tell you the amount of GP per Stardust that you would get out of it. So in this case, if you're a main account at least, your Stardust will essentially be worth 76 GP each. If you're an Iron Man, that's a different story. You're probably going to buy the bag full of gems because you're probably not going through that much soft clay. Now that we've gone through these 10 activities or categories of activities, I've added them all up, which you already knew from the title, but you can see everything laid out that I've gone over, and this comes out to a total of 124 AFK collection log slots. Obviously, this video isn't by any means a comprehensive list of everything you can AFK to get collection log slots. There's a lot more AFK stuff out there, but the goal of this video was to give you some ideas of things to do. And I really hope this video sparked at least one idea of something you can do when you want to AFK. If you really like AFKing, I made a video showing off 15 RuneLite plugins that help you AFK in OSRS. So if you want to find out how to set up the idle notifier plugin along with a bunch of others, click the card on screen now.